Everyone, and thank you for being here today. Um, the our last session, our conversation with Frank Bedard. Um, in our last session, the there's an image in Frank's poem that reminded me of qualities in Andrew Marvell's The Definition of Love, and I thought this would be a great poem to follow Frank's. So that was one of the reasons that I chose it, although it's been on my mind to do it for quite some time, and I love doing Andrew Marvell, partly because I know Andrew Marvell is one of Denise's favorite poets, and she even has a book with a title that comes from Andrew Marvell, Curious Peach, which is I think, a wonderful phrase and a great title for a book of poems. So this is Andrew Marvell's The Definition of Love. My love is of a birth as rare as 'tis for object, strange and high. It was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Magnanimous despair alone could show me so divine a thing, where feeble hope could ne'er have flown, but vainly flapped its tinsel wing. And yet I quickly might arrive where my extended soul is fixed. But fate does iron wedges drive, and always crowds itself betwixt. For fate with jealous eye does see two perfect loves, nor lets them close. Their union would her ruin be, and her tyrannic power depose. And therefore her decrees of steel us as the distant poles have placed, though love's whole world on us doth wheel, not by themselves to be embraced. Unless the giddy heaven fall, and earth some new confol sorry, unless the giddy heaven fall, and earth some new convulsion tear, and us to join, the world should all be cramped into a planisphere. As lines, so loves, oblique, may well themselves in every angle greet, but ours, so truly parallel, though infinite, can never meet. Therefore, the love which us, therefore the love which us doth bind, but fate so enviously debars, is the conjunction of the mind and opposition of the stars. Um, Denise.
Oh, well, I have to say, I love this poem as much or even more every time I read it or hear it. So thank you for choosing it and reading it, Lloyd.
What what do you love about it?
Oh, so many things.
Mm.
It's so precise. It's so skilled. It's so subtly clever at the same time. It uses pacing to make its point in a subtle, uh, rhythmic way, the way he does in um, uh,
To his
okay,
que
I'll
to
come.
his To his coy mistress? Or?
To his coy mistress, yes. Um, and magnificently, he uses not just geometry, but trigonometry for all his metaphysical metaphors. And that
Ooh,
blows my mind. And moreover, he makes them not abstract so much as tangible. So that's why.
yeah. Tell me about trigonometry. I think I missed that.
Well, I kind of know what it is and what some of its definitions are, but the concept of opposition. Oh, he's
I
got
see.
astronomy in the mix too, but of
Right.
opposition is it's one of those so precise that it refers to sides of triangles. It's whichever side is opposite an angle. So even if you move around the triangle, the
Right.
other side is way over there.
Yeah.
Um, and the use of planisphere, which is it's sort of the intersection of geometry and astronomy. I've never read anything like it.
Yeah. Um, 17th century poetry, or let's say the 18th century poets, who really just didn't get what was happening a century earlier, um, insulted or thought they were insulting 17th century poets by calling them metaphysical. And then I guess it was T.S. Eliot who thought that metaphysical was actually a great term for to describe some of the poetry of the 17th century poets who used complicated images from, especially in their love poems, that you would never have imagined would be in a love poem, like geometry and astronomy and trigonometry and astrology and all sorts of areas of perception and intellect that you would not expect to find in a love poem. And of course, I think we value that uh, today um, and are excited about it and want, enjoy it when we see it in contemporary poems, um, but are in awe of these great 17th century poets like Marvell and John Donne and George Herbert and Henry Vaughan and so on. Um, so it's also challenging. It's challenging the reader. I think it was challenging Marvel's contemporary readers, and it challenges us because we've lost track of some of those complex references. So we sort of depend on footnotes and some, and dictionaries uh, to help explain what the language refers to. But the language is so exciting and remains exciting. But thank you, Denise. And I share your enthusiasm, and it's one of the reasons I love your poetry too.
Thank
Um,
you.
uh, what about the title? Um, oh, um, what about the title?
Lord,
Listen.
Oh no, I worked and worked over that because I kept getting caught in our 20th century use of the word definition, but
I,
it
I
seems
think,
to me it has to do with his using it in the sense, the old sense of fixing a boundary on something or precise description or marking the limits of something so that it's capturing the spatial sense in the poem and also the anguish of the love not being able to be fulfilled.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I've been going with
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Nick, yeah.
Well, as to the title, I myself wondered, is this what I would write to my love? Is this addressed to a person? And uh, at the end, the last stanza, it's clear that it is. But it seems a little unusual to talk about the definition of love to the person you love. You think you might have a more romantic title. So that was my first maybe superficial thought.
Yeah. But this definition of love is that in a way, love is impossible. And so, I mean, of course, it's not directly to another person. Um, it may be about another person, and we have no idea who that might be, or even if there is another person, and whether Marvel is just this is just a kind of his attempt to define what love is.
Well,
And
that's what I was wondering. That question is what I was
yeah,
wondering.
yeah. And for him, l- the definition includes the impossibility of that love uh, being fulfilled. Um, uh, but it's a challenging title, and it's an intellectual title. And I think one of the things that I sort of love to deal with in this poem is the conjunction, to use one of Marvel's words, the conjunction of um, the intellectual idea of a definition, that in fact maybe there is no real first object of his affection at this moment, and the possible underlying passion and frustration and pain that this particular definition involves. That is, if there is another person, if there is a real human being with whom Andrew Marvell is in love, who has inspired this definition, then it's a very painful, emotionally, very painful situation uh, that he is dealing with in a very indirect way. And of course, it's that I think that tension between the intellectuality of the poem and the possible, maybe real passion underlying it that's so powerful and that seems so extraordinary that anyway, more of that later. Denise, yeah. Oh,
Well,
and then Ginny after that.
I've always felt that this poem was personal, which
Mhm.
is part of what makes it so plangent. The first two lines are pretty specific. My
Mhm.
love is of a birth as rare as 'tis for object strange and high. So, the immediate sense I get is of an enormous difference in rank, in social rank.
Mhm.
And with the strange, is uh, introduces an element of the unexpected. And I think the poem is directed at someone who has this same sort of intellectual uh, range and flexibility, and that's one of the elements of the love.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing, Marvell was famously secretive, which is sort of on brand for his, his life as he lived it. He was sent as a sort of spy and diplomatic emissary a number of times. But he was also very secretive about his private life.
Yeah.
And at least one biographer has speculated that he was gay. Not that there's any direct evidence of that, because he didn't marry or possibly marry at one point in his life. Um, but this biographer says maybe he wasn't, but he's probably the only poet of his era who praised the smell of the sweat of a mower, of an agricultural worker. and and that, that's tantalizing. But of course he did write about agriculture and gardens, and so I haven't made a judgment, but I think there was a real object of this thwarted love, and it's the definition of his own experience of love within
Thank
that geometric circle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ginny.
Yeah, I thought this poem reminded me of the math concept approaching infinity. I'm not sure what that concept means, but there's movement forward, but you never really get there.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Almost the climax of the poem is really about that very issue that you raised. Was there another hand? Oh, uh, okay. Um, so yeah, so we start with this with this praise. I mean, as Denise was saying, this praise that's also, that creates the impossibility. Uh, and and with as my love is of a birth as rare as 'tis for object. That is, his love is rare, but the object is also rare. So there are kind of two things going on that um he's I think that opening line means that in a way he's saying my love is stronger than anyone else's, but the object of my love is also strange and high. So some more elevated figure than he is. Um, it was begotten, and then we get this, obviously, the sexual language in the poem. It was begotten by despair. So he's he begins the poem with this sexual act that is the image of the impossible the impossibility of of sexuality. It was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Um, it was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Um, uh, so the these symbolic figures. Oh, oh, Gail is joining us. Great. Hi, Gail. Um, so there's this paradox at the very beginning of the poem about the love being impossible described, and that impossibility is described in sexual terms. Um, uh, Magnanimous despair. Um, why does that make us smile? Um,
I'll say something.
Anyone? Oh, yeah, Ginny.
Um, I really liked it without really understanding it. And I was puzzled because I'm not sure if it means that everyone feels despair. But which was for me unusual because despair is a very isolating feeling. You feel cut off from human connection. And yet, magnanimous is something very generous and outward. So I was a little confused by the phrase.
Yeah, uh, legitimately.
Okay.
Um, uh, to me, oh, oh, Susan, were you gonna? I'm, I can't see the the image is so small. I couldn't really tell. But it seems to me it's a phrase of just tremendous, of really profound irony. Uh, Magnanimous despair. Oh yes, despair has been my despair. Despair has been so kind to me. It's really increased my despair because the object of my love is so divine a thing. So here he is on the earth in love, presumably, and yet the object of his love is divine. So there's well, there's already been a lot of tension in these opening lines, but already the the idea of love being, oh, Bonnie, yeah, please.
Oh, I just wanted to say that magnanimous, I think, implies a superiority, having all the cards, being the benefactor.
Yes.
So in this, despair does, with that one word, despair has the upper hand. In
Right. Yes, right. No, exactly. Yeah. Uh, and that, yeah, that so generous, so kind to bestow on lowly me an object so far above me to love. Um, Magnanimous despair alone, only something so generous, so magnanimous, could could show me so divine a thing. And I have to say, the next two lines are contain one of my favorite images in all of Western poetry. Magnanimous despair alone could show me so divine a thing, where feeble hope could ne'er have flown, but vainly flapped its tinsel wing, its tinsel wing. Um, it's so witty and then so poignant and so painful. Feeble hope, magnanimous despair. Despair is hopelessness. And hopelessness is infinitely generous. But hope is really the hope that this could be resolved, that there is any hope. Hope is so feeble that it's like some kind of what artificial little bird. It's tinsel wing. I tinsel. Oh, sorry, Hume. Hi, Hume.
I just wanted to say, and it seems to me magnanimous despair, it reminds me of exquisite pain. There's something there's something about
Right.
having a tunnel into this experience that's exquisite and painful at the same time.
Yeah. And exquisite, I think the word itself has a kind of pain in its literalness. Isn't exquisite something that's sort of squeezed to painfulness? Yehudi. Yeah.
Do you think that the word thing refers to his love or the phenomenon of love and how he feels? I mean, it's
Yeah. I mean, the answer.
odd to refer to a person you love as a thing.
It's. I think the answer is yes to both, because everything everything here is so ambiguous. Everything has such a kind of double meaning. And yes, so divine a thing is the concept, but it's also, how could it not include the person, the human being there? And that, yeah, so yeah, yes is the answer to both of your questions. I think, yeah. Where feeble hope could ne'er have flown, could never have flown. Hope could never get off the ground. Hope itself is impossible, but vainly flapped. I mean, just every word just seems so, sort of brilliantly chosen. And you get this image, this indelible image, this unforgettable image of this little, I don't know, Christmas tree ornament, um, you know, trying to get off the ground or to get off a branch, and it just can't. Denise, do you want to add anything to that? I just adore that image, and I've never forgotten it from the first time I read this poem.
No, it stays fresh, doesn't it?
It's yeah.
It's stunning. It's the kind of thing that comes back. I was just trying to, this discussion was making me think of something that David Godine said about writing poetry. He says and I don't do him justice. It's like throwing a rose petal into the Grand Canyon and expecting an echo. It's Dante-esque. It's Dante-esque in the purity of its hopelessness.
Uh-huh.
So
That's great.
it's right on brand.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that's one of the best lines from David Godine that I've ever heard. Um uh
Oh, Nick, did you want to add something to that?
oh,
Well, just
sorry.
just as for the word tinsel, I think its earliest meaning were uh, something superficially appearing to be valuable, but not really, like fool's gold.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
so that was I thought I did use a dictionary, and,
Good.
and that's what I found, and I thought he might be using it in that sense.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. That sounds right to me. Yeah.
Lloyd,
Yes, please.
there's a person who would like to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's me.
Oh, Jules, hi.
Yeah.
I was noticing that despair and hope, and then we're soon gonna get to fate, all have this like figurehood, some sort of deification is happening, or as if they're like um I mean it kind of reminds me of like the way that gods are interacting with each other and taking shape in like a
Mm.
book of Homer or something like that. But love doesn't get that. Love is my love. It's like a private thing. And it seems to be sort of like wimpy up against these other
Mm.
godly godly figures that are really just experiences. But love is almost a consequence of these godly figures talking to each other or interacting with each
Mhm.
other, rather than getting a sort of figurehood itself.
And yet, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but yet love is capitalized. The word is capitalized.
Where? Only in the title, I think. Is it
Oh,
capitalized
oh,
somewhere
in
else?
my copy, it's capitalized.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm
And
on the Poetry Foundation copy, and it is
yeah, well, that you'd think that was accurate, but in my copy of the poem, love is capitalized every
that's
time
so
it's
consequential. I'm surprised that they didn't copy that over.
um yes, I would agree. I would agree. I didn't make the comparison, and I should have.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
but
egg on my
but
face.
but I think that doesn't undermine that doesn't undermine your point,
Hmm.
because I think that the I think the point is genuine. Um, and yet I quickly might arrive where my extended soul is fixed. Um, what about that extended soul, Denise?
Well, it's a complete conjunction. It's it describes the sort of spiritual oneness with which certain kinds of love are described. Um, it's as if two individuals are blended spiritually, which is a trope that you get in a lot of poetry, including Indian devotional poetry,
Hmm.
maybe especially in that sort of poetry. The other thing I love about this stanza is something that it shares with at least one part of Coin Mistress, which is that there's the leisurely, and yet I quickly might arise where my extended soul is fixed. It's very leisurely. But
Mhm.
fate does iron wedges drive and always crowds itself betwixt.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
up there.
Um, I I don't disagree. I mean, I agree, but I also see some other sort of play on extended soul.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a cheeky phallic metaphor,
Yes.
but it also draws our attention to the idea that love is an immaterial force, that you have to make material by meeting your lover and actualizing that love and being together physically. And I think that fate, which is also, immaterial, it's something that we imagine,
Mhm.
is somehow the third figure in this love. So right at this point, when you are able to imagine your love having some kind of physical consummation,
Yeah.
there are these thoughts like fate is like overthinking these days, it is suddenly there. It's the making too heavy of the situation, perhaps.
Mhm. Well, and pretty heavy with driving iron wedges between the two lovers, or the idea of the two lovers. But yeah, it was I'm sorry that my mind is is in the gutter, but but it's Andrew Marvell, and extended soul does seem like a phallic image to me, and but an ironic one, because it's the soul, and the soul presumably isn't sexual, or isn't graphically sexual, and yet what the word that he uses is has such sexual overtones. So uh on the I think one of the um Denise, when you mentioned before that that Marvel has also been at least suspected of being gay, and we know maybe less about his personal life than almost any other major poet of certainly of that period. Um, we know he was unmarried, and almost everyone else was, although that does it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Um, but this paradox here of the way the spiritual and the sexual, or the abstract and the sex and the physically sexual, are combined, is I think it's one of the reasons we get so excited about Andrew Marvell, um, because he does that. And I mean, the other poets do that also, Donne especially. But it's there's something, you look at this language, and it's so startling, uh, even in places where you don't expect it to be. Um, Certainly, the footnote in my edition. Yeah, Nick, let me just finish. The footnote in my edition makes no reference, which defines extended soul, makes no suggestion that there's any kind of sexuality there. Nick, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to pick up on that just thought right there, because I have a little different slant on this line, fate does iron wedges drive. The
Yeah.
first time I read this poem, and I'd never read this poem before
Mhm.
I received it here, that line, iron wedges drive, just jumped up and hit me. It's so different than anything had come so far.
Yeah.
But later in the poem, we'll find that violence and force are uh, are referred to in different ways.
Yeah.
This is the first time so far in the poem, and for whatever reason, that just jumped off the page. And I said, "What? This doesn't fit." But of course, later on we see it does.
It does, yeah. But as Denise was saying before, it's also the language is also has a kind of solidity and and the rhythmic drive, rhythmic power that's very, I mean, I think it's the sort of opposite side of the coin of vainly flapped its tinsel wing and fate does iron wedges drive, and even the sounds of the words vainly flapped its tinsel wing. It's so there's such a delicacy. It's ironic, but it's delicate. And then suddenly iron wedges drive is just the consonants and the power of that of those of that rhythmic kind of pounding. It's very startling and very uh and you're right, it's new in the poem, but it's not going to end there. It'll come back. Fate does iron wedges drive and always crowds, wedges, crowds itself betwixt. It's just, even if I encourage you to say it out loud, because you have to say these words in it takes a different shape of your lips and tongue and teeth to say these words and after you've said vainly flapped its tinsel wing. So I mean, and then here this isn't just hope that's being dashed, but something really violent that is interfering, that's intercepting the possibility of this love being um, gratified or consummated. For fate, and then we get this real this sort of uh, this little allegory. Fate with jealous eyes does see two perfect loves, nor lets them close. So here is the close, there's the extended soul, but there's also the impossibility of the lovers uniting. Close is just, I think, is just bringing together. It's also resolving, bringing to a conclusion. Their union, and then fate becomes a kind of a real personage in this. There's fate with jealous fate, and it's fate. It's an inevitability. Fate is jealous. With jealous eyes does see two perfect loves, perfect, complete, nor lets them close. Their union would her ruin be, and her tyrannic power depose. So, um, there's there's this figure of fate, um, the jealous the jealous woman, and fate is personified as I mean, as is traditional, as one of the fates, one of the classic fates, as female, uh who is really a tyrant. uh oh yeah, Jules, could you just say what you sent in the note?
I said that I think it's interesting that this line, their union would her ruin be, that fate kind of can't have the power that she in this poem she has, so long as they are happy, or that they are unified, or that
Right,
their love is well.
right.
And it's a surprise or something that fate isn't the architect of that well-being or that
Yeah,
union.
yeah,
Fate is instead threatened by it. It is like in opposition to fate.
right, right.
And Lloyd is, and yeah, it's fate whose eyes kept closed.
Right,
And we've got a couple people, Denise and then Ellen and Jim wanted to
right.
chime in.
Denise and then Ellen and Jim.
Well, I think that Jules is right to harken back to classical antiquity, because this stanza makes me think of Venus and her famous jealousy that put an iron wedge between lovers, and also of the gods are sort of merged with fate in the Dido and Aeneas story, and then the linguistic stamp is put on that in Chaucer's version of the Dido and Aeneas story, which is called the House of Fame.
Right.
And fame in this case, and fate being a unified force, basically.
Right.
And of course, in the story, you've got the interference of a lot of gods, including Venus.
Right. Jim?
You're muted, Jim.
Oh, you're muted.
Ellen and Jim?
Jim, you're muted.
I am. Can you hear me?
Now you're on.
I wanted to talk about the word close.
Oh, yeah.
Because the poem is so much about distance between the two. So two perfect loves, nor let them close, meaning
Right.
end, but also being close.
Close. Yeah.
Being distant from each other, which seems to be the metaphor throughout the whole poem. And that, and especially near the end, where again the geometry is played out so beautifully. So love's oblique may well themselves in every angle greet, so they come together.
Right.
But ours is so truly parallel that though infinite can never meet. That's so brilliant, parallel and infinite.
Yeah.
But not being able to be together. But that's the essence of the poem, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Yes, and I like the your idea of close and close. You see that more than you hear it. If you're going to read it out loud, you're going to have to make a choice.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, we have a couple comments in the chat.
Oh, yeah, they go by too fast for me to see them.
They do.
One
And
of
Jules, I love what your last comment was. Could you just speak to this sort of the union threatens fate?
Oh, we talked about that just a minute ago about how it's like it's surprising that that fate isn't also designing the union or something, if fate has so much power. Um, because that shouldn't be something that could occur to the detriment of fate itself. That should be fate should be all powerful or something.
right, or has to be, wants to be, and won't allow her power to be diminished. Are Marita, are there other comments in the chat that
Just one more from Denise about how in her version, love and loves are capitalized in every stanza in her version. So, like we were talking about earlier, it may change the tone of the poem.
right, right. Yeah, oh, thanks. Um, um, so any um okay. Um Depose um is an interesting word. Their union would her ruin be, and her tyrannic power depose. Um any thought about that?
Well, it seems like in order to love truly or well, you need to be able to experience a loss of power or to submit to your
Oh,
beloved.
hmm.
And this metaphor of government, like the tyrannical government in classical political science, is like the worst one because it's the most rigid and is, you know, the leader who is unable to give up power is sort of being made to seem like the bad lover who is maybe too forceful or something like that.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also Polly, turn your sound on. There you go.
Fate in that world was responsible for the hierarchy.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
for the that was fated. Your position in the hierarchy was fated
Really written in stone.
in
Yeah.
stone. And so for this love to succeed would would let loose a liberation that would be fate's undoing and
Right.
the
Catastrophic.
hierarchy's undoing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and therefore her decrees of steel, and this all ties in with what you both been saying. Her decrees of steel, us as the distant poles have placed. So now we get a little uh um um
Geography.
I'm sorry, yeah, yeah, thanks. Um um Though love's whole world on us doth wheel. Um so they are these two, the lovers are the axis of this whole world of love, but they're they're the distant poles. Um, so they're at the opposite ends of this axis. And then though love's whole world on us doth wheel. So there the axis. The whole world of love is turning on that axis, but the poles can't come together. And then the next stanza is going to develop that. Unless the giddy heaven fall and earth some new convulsion tear. I, the destruction of the order, of the faded order, would be complete. Oh, Bill.
Ah,
Hi. Oh,
I've got the time.
I'm
Have I
glad
got
to
the time? Have I got the time wrong, or are we just starting?
No, we've been here for a while.
Oh no, I fouled things up. Oh, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, but I'm glad to see you. I was worried.
Ah, good, thank you.
Um, so we're in stanza one, two, three, four, five. Stanza 6.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Unless the giddy heaven fall. So heaven would turn into some kind of trivial, diminished thing, and earth some new, so either heaven in its dizziness, giddiness, stupidity is going to come down, or earth some new convulsion tear. So it's like a kind of seismic earthquake. This is all what's behind all this is if they were allowed to consummate their love, and that the universe would collapse if, oh, daylight savings, that
Yes, I fell foul of that once before, I think. Yeah.
uh well, I fall afoul of it every year.
Right.
Therefore as us at uh, though love's whole world, I want to go back to that line about though love's whole world on us doth wheel. And the way what he's describing as as love itself, as being a kind of the center of the world, and everything is spinning around it. But fate would be the sky would fall. The earth would explode if the two lovers were allowed to consummate their love. Unless the giddy heaven fall and earth some new convulsion. I mean, this language, convulsion, tear, and us to join, the world would all be cramped into a planisphere. So essentially, there's a globe of the world. And the two lovers are at the opposite poles of that world. And if they were allowed to unite, it would suddenly, the globe would be flattened into, you know, into a map in which Greenland is the largest the largest continent on that map. It would just be flattened out into a flat map. As lines, so just as lines, so loves oblique may well themselves in every angle greet. Well, yeah, there are lots of lovers who can, who can join, who can come together. Um, and like lines at oblique angles, the lines are going to come together. And that's fine, except that they're not the perfect love. They're just the ordinary, the everyday, people getting together.
Jim,
But
did you? Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, let me unmute.
You're
You're
unmuted. You're okay.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. I just want to continue what I've been talking about before about
Sure.
distance and togetherness, because it's here us to join the world. If they join, the world would be cramped into a planisphere, which is a two-dimensional object. It's
Right.
uh, and so, that's what would happen if they come together. So it's impossible for them, it's this whole incredible tension between distance and togetherness. If the whole world collapses and they come together, it's useless in a way. It's this struggle, but though our loves are parallel, though infinite, can never meet. I mean, so that's the issue. With the true impossibility of this. And,
Yes. Yeah. If their love, I mean, he is saying that they actually, if there are two lovers, they could actually get together if their love were imperfect. But if they are perfect, if they are the perfect lovers, then their conjunction, their meeting is impossible. Um, and and isn't that the definition? Isn't that what it means to define love or define the perfect love? Denise?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get the feeling that the oblique loves are offered up as perfect loves.
No, they're
Maybe
not.
no, more typical.
Right, right.
But
But let me just say that
oh,
Marvel sort of describes them with some contempt.
yes, but I don't know. I don't know if it's contempt or if he's saying that they're inferior or imperfect. It's just more ordinary, I suppose. And I think you're really on to something to focus in on Marvel's class distinctions, which you did a couple stanzas ago. I think he is profoundly reflecting on the what is it, the steel bands, well, there's the iron wedges, and then the decrees of steel is such a rigid class system, and I think this fits in well with with Marvell's own story is, you know, there was nothing ranking about him. He was a clergyman's son who was orphaned early and only got sent to Cambridge as a day student because when he was about to age out of school in Hull, his schoolmaster said, you know, persuaded Cambridge that he should be able to go there as a day student. And then later, the town of Hull sent Marvell to Parliament to represent them, and he was in Parliament as a backbencher until the day that he died. And after he died, his housekeeper, who had lived under the same roof for many years, stated that they were had been secretly married. And when the officials were looking into this, they said, well, that's impossible. Your rank is so much lower. And her response was, you've read his poetry. You know, he wouldn't discriminate against me on the basis of rank. He wasn't that kind of guy. So the astuteness of her reply makes me think, maybe they were secretly married. Could be. And, you know, and he wouldn't have wanted to display a love like that you know, that convulsed the world with its impropriety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hume, did you want to add to that? I know your
Your hand is up. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I did, but you know, it's wonderful, Denise, what you just said. I wanted to harken back a little earlier to what Lloyd said about the definition of love, because I wanted to connect that to what Susan had said earlier about defining the limits. So there's something there, you know, there's a limit in these oblique loves, or you know, these sort of second order, second rate loves that's different from the parallel, the perfect, you know, unachievable love. And that seems to tie into what Susan said.
Yeah, Yehudi and Susan.
Go ahead. No. I have a sneaking feeling that on another level, the poem seeks to make a definition of high art and the artist's role in the sense that the artist who, if he is able or aspires to create a perfect work of art, really in many respects needs to dissociate himself with normal life.
Well, it is the idea that perfection is almost humanly impossible, and that there's some kind of active force in the universe, fate, or whatever it may be, that's driving these iron wedges between the ideal and the compromised real, the compromised everyday. I think that's a profound analogy. Susan, what you were going to say?
Well, I was just so struck by the imagery that he has used so constantly of the geometry in such a brilliant way, and her degrees of steel for me could also be a compass.
Yes.
That would outline the earth, and the wheeling of the earth could go in a two-dimensional way as well as the three-dimensional way, and that the planisphere, as it was said, going into two dimensions, which by its nature creates lines that do this, and that meet at certain angles, but the parallel ones don't, and that that's picked up at the end by DeBar's, which for me caught the image again of a planisphere, which shows that longitudinal latitude, but just the brilliance of using these images that are geometrical and abstract in certain ways, with then juxtaposing them to giddy heavens. I mean, and earth, some new convulsion, tear. And I saw tear as welling up and tear just as close. I
Right.
read as close until I saw it needed to rhyme with depose, so it became close. I just find the density of the images
Yeah.
extraordinary.
You're just reminding me of another poem by another contemporary poet, or John Donne's Valediction Forbidding Morning, where he uses the image of the what do you
Projector?
that
Twin
makes a
compasses,
circle.
stiff twin
A projector?
compasses.
Compass.
The compasses, yeah, the stiff twin compasses. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, as the his wife is at the center, making his circle just. He is traveling and traveling in, also traveling around her, and her the point of the compass stuck in the center is keeping his circle perfect until he returns to her. And so they're kind of contemporary, or almost contemporary images of these scientific um uh mathematical uh um images that are so startling in poetry, that are really kind of new to poetry, and how brilliantly these poets use those images, those objects, from the world of science and mathematics and cartography, uh, and they're still exciting. They're still powerful. But ours, as line so loves oblique, may well, and oblique just seems, Denise, yeah.
I'm coming around to this idea of oblique as secondary, or not as high and pure,
Right.
because as I listening to this, as I extend the lines, oblique loves will cross, but then they go off in different directions. So they're not as perfect as the ones that stay parallel into, I guess now we say parallel lines meet at infinity, but in Marvel's eyes, they go on past infinity.
Right. Yeah, I still can't, I still can't intellectually accept that the meeting of parallel lines. Uh, but ours so truly parallel, not the Einstein, truly parallel, though infinite, can never meet. Therefore, and this isn't the first time that Marvel uses the word therefore. Oh, Bill, yeah.
Oh, I think I did that by accident, but
But please.
but something which occurs to me. I'm sorry if this takes you back to something that's already been said. I shouldn't really
Okay.
contribute in view of my not knowing what's happened previously, but the discussion about the opposition between the two loves, the perfect one and the compromised one, puts me in mind of a poet who's got really very little to do with Marvell apart from this. But Sylvia Plath has a poem which begins,
Oh.
Perfection is terrible, it cannot have children. And that seems in a way to carry over the Marvellian opposition,
Yeah.
but to give it the opposite inflection, so that that poem becomes a celebration of the imperfect.
Right.
Whereas this,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I was just thinking before about therefore and the therefore that comes near the end of To His Coy Mistress, and that this uh now therefore while the youthful yew sits on thy skin like morning dew, and that this language of logic and it's sort of intellectual language used in the most emotional context is 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 very remarkable, and it's very powerful, um and surprising, uh and I think it still surprises us. Therefore the love which us doth bind, and bind, it's is another one of those, it's very physical, very tangible, um uh emotion expressed in real physicality. The love which us doth bind, but fate so enviously debars, is the conjunction of the mind. And then these very fancy words, conjunction and opposition, these words that are used in in such intellectual contexts, um is the
therefore may be a bit different though. I'm wondering whether the logical connectives like therefore in this poem are in a sense operating legitimately, whereas the one which you refer to in Coy Mistress is a little bit duplicitous, because that poem rests on a logical fallacy, doesn't it, of denying the antecedent. If not A, then B, as it were.
Therefore B, yeah.
Yeah. But here they seem to function more with greater validity.
It's just the language of that. Therefore is really is not a word that you would expect to find in a love poem. And Denise?
Well, I think listening to Bill's references to logic, I think conjunction is a function or a term in logic too. Where A and B, if both are true, then A and B. Okay, I can't remember the logic, but somebody here must. If you have A and B, oh please, there's got to be a logician in the house. You want to be one? But that's from logic too.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Therefore, but it's the definition in the title that's coming to its conclusion. So therefore, The love which us doth bind, but fate so enviously debars, is the conjunction of the mind, but and 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 opposition of the stars. So, um, so that's all. Those are also terms in astronomy. So my footnote uh, tells me, and it's just I I just one of the things that's just so remarkable about Marvell and that's remarkable about this poem and these poems is the way the language is pulled in from so many really unexpected places. That's pulled in from places that are not supposed to be about feelings, about emotions, about love. Um, and yet there they are, and they're all operating on all their burners. Oh, Arrow, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's the references to different disciplines of knowledge. It is strange. I really enjoy it. In a way, I think that the poem is talking about two lovers, but then I also feel like it's talking about the meeting of the poet and their perfect subject, which is also a union that fate conspires to destroy. But then these disciplines of knowledge themselves were also moments when the collective human mind, or Western science or Western philosophy, met its perfect subject at the time, and that was also a union of love, but it was a union of love that was conceived in the mind, which I think, like,
Hmm.
you can almost see this second to last line as it's not just about, it's maybe not so sad that the lovers can't meet, because these disciplines that he's referring to are perfect unions that have already occurred and which the poet is able to make use of. So it's like there's a discourse of love that is also the way in which knowledge was created that the poet is referring to, sneakily, maybe.
Hmm. Yeah, but it's not the last line. It's the next to last line. So the conjunction of the mind is sort of the happy ending, but the opposition of the stars is what brings us back to this painful inevitability of not the inevitability or the impossibility of a union. So it's teasing us by its, I mean, the philosophical and even mathematical, astrological, astronomical, all this stuff that's going on is sort of teasing us to think that, well, maybe there really are so truly parallel. How marvelous that is. And yet it's the opposition of the stars. And that there is this kind of terrible poignance at the end that he's not letting it go. He's not, I mean, even into his coy mistress, you have this sense that there really is some sort of possibility that these lovers are gonna get together before time's winged chariot runs them down. In this poem, I think there isn't that possibility, and that the idea of a perfect love is really not, it's not possible that that perfect love can be consummated on earth.
I know we just have another minute. CD, I
Yeah,
think,
right. Oh,
wanted
CD,
to add
yes.
something.
I
Well,
was just wondering if Denise was referring to the logical, if A is true and B is true, then C must be true. Okay.
Oh.
I just wanted to thank everybody. This was amazing, fascinating discussion.
oh, thank you for coming, and please come back. Yehudi.
Do you find the poem very difficult to read aloud? My impression is that this is not a poem that flows because the thought is so dense. It's like a hurdle, a hurdle race, in which, of course, you can't run quite as fast as you could in a race as straightforward without having to jump. But you're impeded by thoughts and concepts almost constantly.
Yeah.
Which I say impeded, and I think that's the choice word for this. I think that's why, for example, something rare happened in the reading today. You, of all people, actually stumbled a few times, and
Yeah. No, that's because the print in my copy is so small.
No, I think it's because intrinsically the poem is really a series of very profound hurdles.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that. No, but my apologies.
No, you brought action. No, on the contrary, you dramatize something that's there, and I think needs to be recognized.
Well, some of the language is challenging.
Some indeed.
Last comments?
There was one last comment, and maybe we'll have to answer
Thank you.
through email, that Jules and Arrow wish we could have talked about the metrical substitution in the last line. So maybe we can pass some emails about this.
The third to last line.
Third to last line, which would be great. This has been a really great conversation. And Yehudi, I agree with you. I think this was a really challenging poem, for me at least. So I love the conversation, and we will be meeting. We have a date for our April program, will be April the 12th. So please stay tuned. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, everyone. This was a great conversation. And
thanks, Marita.
Maybe, Lloyd, we can answer some of the last comments through email.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for